Welcome. Glad to be with you all today. Talk a little bit about um, my journey, the work that I do at Lockheed Martin, and the career that I've had, and the work that I've been doing in what's now referred to as diversity and inclusion space. So,
What made you first want to get involved? I saw that you started in the state of Texas, but what made you get
yeah,
involved? This young guy from New Jersey who went to
yeah,
school in New York and then found himself all the way to the other side of the country. How did you get
yeah.
involved and why?
So it's interesting. I kind of fell into it. There's a lot of great things happen in your lives. It's not really the path that you intend for yourself, but one that kind of finds you. And after I graduated from law school, I worked in criminal courts. I was a law clerk for the presiding judge for the criminal division in Ocean County, New Jersey, Judge Daniels, Sean, you probably know. And I was his law clerk, and working for a high profile judge means you get to work on reviewing cases that are in serious importance. So I was doing wiretaps, murder, kingpin cases, things like that, big cases that we were working on. And when you are, working for a judge, part of the big portion of their job is to make sure that trials, but also the investigations that lead to those trials, are fair, and that they are justified. And it's really fact checking and checking what the work that law enforcement and police officers are doing. And so I really built my skill set in conducting investigations and examining investigations by doing work in the criminal arena there. After I finished working in New Jersey, I came back to DC and started working for the government, and initially started working in labor relations field. So dealing with union and represented employees, dealing with collective bargaining agreements and grievances and negotiations. And as a part of that work, kind of had to capitalize on my investigative experience to do work. And as I got a little bit more known for doing that work, I was kind of what, the usual challenge is, right? You're really good at something, somebody gives you something else to do. And so that was when the work of, doing investigations into civil rights violations kind of fell into my um, collection of responsibilities that I had working for the government. And at that point, it was making sure that there was equitable distribution and compliance with the anti-discrimination laws at the Department of Labor. So handling employee complaints around folks who are trying to get their benefits from workers' comp or unemployment benefits or things like that, and making sure that we're doing that in a compliant way. So that kind of got me into the realm of what's called DEI now. And one of the things that I kind of always highlight and differentiate in my career is that because, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit more, kind of this attention that's around the work of what's being referred to as diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, JEDI, D&I, DEI, all of those different names for it. I consider myself an equal employment opportunity professional. I consider myself, and I am, a civil rights attorney. And I hope that one of the things that we'll kind of really flesh out today is the fact that the foundational requirements and really the roots of everything that you're hearing about around in the diversity and inclusion space finds itself in the laws that prohibit discrimination in the workplace and in other areas or avenues of life. And so that is what my profession is. I think we've gotten to a place where, as you can see, depending on how the pendulum is swinging, diversity and inclusion efforts can really be at the forefront of certain arenas, and they can be pulled back very quickly depending on how people feel about it. But that the things that are the foundations, that are the pillars of the work, like Title VII, like equal employment opportunity, is what I specialize in making sure that folks are being treated fairly in the way that they live their lives every day.
So with that in mind, we actually did a survey at our last meeting where I kept everybody kind of hostage that attended and asked them
Mm-hmm.
to complete our survey because no one was doing it when I just emailed it out. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, let me take this opportunity to do so. The results of that survey were extremely impactful. And I'm going to make sure that we send it out and share with everybody, all members across the board. And you're going to start seeing some of the results we posted on our LinkedIn as well as on our social media pages. But my question for you is that right now, one of the surveys mentioned who, since George, the murder of George Floyd,
Mhm.
years ago, almost 3.5, 4 years ago now. Again, and D&I has had a seat at the table for most corporate companies and things of that nature. We noticed that within the survey taken by several people who were attending the last meeting, that
Mhm.
again, that who has been helped more, which group has been helped more by D&I efforts, and the opinion was white women. Can you give us a feel for your thoughts behind that? I mean, right now, is there a movement where more individuals of color are being helped? And what has the needle moved a lot? Or is it really that single minority of white women who have actually been helped the most?
Yeah, so that's a lot to unpack. So I'll say that in direct response to your question, I think that as a result of George Floyd's murder, there was a lot more attention and a lot more money put into what has been referred to as diversity and inclusion initiatives, things that designed to advance representation in different corporate initiatives or corporate organizations, laws and things that have been passed to change the way that policing occurs or impacts certain people around the nation and around the world. But what we have to also recall is that there was a phrase that's a kind of a resounding theme that you hear about when that all happened, and that is performative action, right? And so there was a lot of things that people did to kind of remove the heat from themselves of not having these diversity and inclusion initiatives in place or not having any kind of stated commitment to advancing equity and advancing representation, at least in the corporate perspective. But you also have to understand these same companies, and I wrote an article about this that's in the ELC journal. Those same companies, a lot of the same companies who were doing those things and putting up the Instagram posts and putting up the different types of advertisements and things to make people feel like they were doing something, were the same companies that were simultaneously getting sued by the EEOC for not even having a policy at their company that said that they prohibit discrimination based on race, right? So you have to understand that when we talk about benefiting from this DEI or diversity and equity initiatives, that there are different places where people are on that journey, right? And there are organizations, companies, businesses that have been doing this work for a long period of time. And then there are companies who, it took George Floyd dying for them to recognize that, racism actually exists in the United States, right? And so that was kind of, I think, a flashpoint for a lot of people, but it was also a very kind of annoying to those of us who've been doing the work for folks to say that it took this for you to realize that there was inequity in the space. Statistically speaking, when we talk, mostly when you hear about who benefits most from DEI initiatives, a lot of times that statistic around white women being the biggest beneficiaries relates specifically to affirmative action initiatives. And that can have a variety of reasons. One is because of the way that some federal programs for the minority and business and women-owned programs are able to capitalize on that. And a lot of times what you see is folks being used as a portion or representative of a company when they may not actually be the person who owns the company. So statistically speaking, a lot of white women benefit from that, or maybe the faces of companies that they haven't actually been working for. But depending on what you say, and that's an argument, right? That people can differ on whether that is actually true or not, or whether those businesses are viable or verifiable, that work has been being done. But when you say folks that benefit from it, it could be in a variety of ways because yes, there was a real impact to lots of money going into Black businesses and efforts that were made by companies like Target and Walmart to have more Black-owned businesses or women-owned or minority-owned businesses in the stores, on the shelves, and that has real impact, from an economic standpoint. But then when you think about kind of the work that I do, and different corporations that have large amounts of employees, attention being paid to the representation of folks at that company may have a real impact on the day-to-day life that somebody has at a large company when they are no longer the only person that looks like themselves in a particular meeting or a room. So we have seen, and this is kind of what I talked about earlier, kind of how the DEI initiatives that pendulum can swing when there's attention or focus based on something or placed on something, because, yes, there were a lot more chief diversity officers hired, right? And those are largely women and people of color who got those positions. But then you also see a couple of years later, a lot of those positions being, evaporated, right? And those teams being cut, and that the cause, you know, premised upon the pandemic and different things that happened financially, economic impacts from the pandemic. You can see, same teams that were flooded with staff and money and resources during that time post George Floyd have, you can look and see where folks have cut those same programs. So yes, there may be a few more folks in the C-suites of certain companies, but statistically speaking, that representation and diversity at the highest levels of the organization, at least corporate America, hasn't really changed much and had a sustaining change. But one of the biggest trends and things that I'm seeing in the corporate space is some diversity and inclusion work is being made a part of the sustainability efforts of the organization. And sustainability has become more important as companies start thinking about the longevity, how they're going to operate, not just a couple weeks or years into the future, but the next century or so, right? And so big companies like mine are thinking about how they're going to keep doing what they do at scale and at pace for years and years to come. And so a part of that, as a result of this changing demographics in the workforce, because let me just kind of as an aside say, the companies like ours and other large companies are now being overly represented by generationally speaking, by folks who are Gen Z and younger, right? And if you can think about what has happened in their lives, if Gen Z and younger, they are millennials, Gen Z, and younger than those. They have been in school during the Obama administration. Title IX, which is the prohibition on harassment and discrimination in colleges and universities, was at the forefront of life. If you can think about all the different things we were hearing around sexual assault, discrimination, money going to girls' teams and our women's teams, and not, or vice versa with men's teams, and equal funding and things like that. Title IX was at the forefront of the college experience for pretty much all of the Obama administration and then some of the Trump administration. And so you have a generation that's now in the workforce, years into their career, into the workforce, who went through their entirety of their college experience, if they went to college, and maybe in high school, went to college and confronted on a daily basis of how they should and shouldn't be treated at work or any other environment, right? And so they understand how people should treat them. They understand what sexual harassment is, how to call it out, how to report it, to know that their employer should have a place for them to go. And that demographic is now highly represented in the workforce. And so one of the changes that we are seeing, and one of the calls that we are having to respond to, is a workforce that says, I'm not as concerned about how much money I can make here. I'm not really as concerned about getting the big title or moving up the ranks. I'm concerned about how you're going to treat me and whether I want to stay here for more than a couple of years, right? Because we're moving away from a society where people get a job after college, stay there for 20 or 30 years, and then retire. A lot more of the people in the workforce are looking for a couple of years experience. I want to learn how to do this, and I'm going to leave and go to another company. I'm going to learn how to do this and leave and go to another company, right? And so what we are seeing on, kind of on the corporate side is folks saying, well, I actually want to know what your company feels about diversity and inclusion. I want to see that issue or that, really relevant information to me. I want to see it on your website, and I want to see a commitment, and I want to see the statements that you make about certain societal events, because if you don't have an opinion, or if you don't share an opinion that I align with, I'm probably not going to work at your company. And so that has become a part, the diversity inclusion initiatives to ensure representation and changing chief purpose officers and all these different positions are being created because we have to respond to the need to have a workforce that wants to come work for us, right? Especially with a demographic of students who are going into, maybe tech opportunities where they're really focusing on our entrepreneurship. And the dream and the goal is not to be a partner or a participant in the corporate American dream, right? And to climb the ladder that way. So all that to say is that a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives are now being partnered with or housed in sustainability efforts. Our Upstander campaign at Lockheed Martin being one of them. So by 2025, every employee at Lockheed Martin will have to go through a training that my team and I have designed that teaches them how to speak up for other people when they witness harassment in the workplace, right? Because we want to develop and maintain a culture where folks know it's consistent with that same demographic that's coming into the workforce, that we are a place where if something happens, your coworker, not just your boss or the person in HR, somebody in my role, is going to speak up for you, stand up for you, or say something in the moment. We're teaching everybody at our company, one, that type of behavior is not acceptable, two, how to call it out, and three, that somebody will be there to support you when it gets called out. And so, I think that what you'll see is a shift to that DEI work to move into sustainability. And a lot of large companies like ours have to think of it that way, because it is a very big part of the enduring legacy of those organizations.
Incredible work. Again, Lockheed Martin, again, is, I'm sure they're really proud and happy to have you
I hope so.
leading that effort
I hope
without
so.
question. In fact, if you don't mind, again, if there's nothing in there, if there's anything in there that can be shared, please
Mhm.
do so. Please send anything you can to me, and I'll share that with all of the members, because the majority of everybody here on this call, we represent much smaller companies. Some
Mhm.
are in leadership positions of those companies, and we want to make sure that, again, making everybody feel as though they have a voice, because again, that's not always the case. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's kind of like fall in line and almost be happy to where you are.
Yeah.
We actually had a question in the survey that we presented out there over the last few weeks, and it said, for an individual, again, how does everybody feel in regards to, if an individual of color has made it to a particular level, do you believe that the responsibility to pick up others falls pretty much solely on them, or is it on other people as well? But right now, and I'm sorry, and if everybody can put their phone on mute, I'd greatly appreciate it. Please check your phone and make sure that's on mute. Um, but again, so with that in mind, tell me, Brother Coefield, what is your feel in regards to the weight of, again, the voice being on the individual who's made it? Now they've gotten to gotten to this level. Now they've got to speak up for everyone, or is that true? Is that, again, how do we give everybody a voice? It's a little
Yeah.
thoughts.
You see, I had to sit up straight when you asked me that question, right? I had to, my posture changed, right? So there's the concept of being the lonely only, and the pressure that may come, whether that's self-imposed or imposed by other people, on the responsibility that you have. If you are a person of color, a woman who gets into a place, at least in corporate America, where you have a position of authority and you're a decision maker, right? And so I don't know that I'm completely there yet. I make, I can make a few shot calls, but not all of them. But my career and my theory has been about my career is to play the game until you start making the rules. And so that's kind of how I've approached it, slowly but surely, kind of as I have progressed. I do know that sentiment exists of, being a person of color, being a man of color, and feeling like there's an obligation that, one, you represent everybody who looks like you or who might be identified similar to you, and that, two, you have an obligation to help as many of those folks, or folks who've been othered in their career, as you possibly can. And that's an immense amount of pressure, responsibility. And I think that is one, it's interesting. There's been a lot of conversation. I think that is one shared, and I'll speak as a Black man. I think that's one that is shared in the Black community, is that we feel very much obligated to reach back and to help, and bring people up as we can, and the obligation there. And then we take note of Black folks who get in those positions and we think that they don't do it, or women who get in those positions and we think that they don't do the same thing. We kind of say, okay, well, that's odd, right? But I, I was given in my career, I've been given opportunities by people to show that I can do what I have been able to do in my career, right? And so I think that it's incumbent on me not to just go back and pick up the next Black guy, lawyer, or anybody that I know to bring them along, but to give people opportunities to shine when they may not have had those opportunities, because that's what somebody did for me, and in various ways throughout my career. So I do feel an obligation to do that. But I'm the only Black male HR director, or executive HR director, at Lockheed Martin, and that number has fluctuated while I've been here, but right now I'm the only one. And so I think that I have taken a personal, step to make sure that I'm not the last, and to try to ensure that there are folks coming behind me who can fill my role, who can do my role, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their skill set, but that I'm giving people opportunities to succeed if, they may not have had that opportunity or just haven't been exposed to it. And I say, I'm from a small town in New Jersey, Lakewood, New Jersey, one of the most diverse places in the United States. And I take Lakewood with me. I take St. John's with me. I take Thurgood Marshall School of Law with me everywhere I go, and the network that I bring, right? And so just because I'm in this position, I'm able to expose people who may not have had or thought about opportunities at companies like Lockheed Martin because I'm here, right? And I know that I can share that with them. And then when they're qualified and they can do the job and they show up strong, then they will be successful. But sometimes people just need to know that there's an opportunity available for them to succeed. I could say a lot more about that, but
oh,
time.
I'm sure you could. In
Yeah.
fact, I like that. The fact is, what, everybody, if you get an opportunity, put into the chat, in essence, where's the city that you're from? Because you know what, we just had Brother Coefield talk to us about he brings Lakewood and St. John's, New York, and Thurgood Marshall with him wherever he is. We all have a different backstory, and learning people's backstory, I think, is extremely important. If you wouldn't mind, throw in the chat. What city are you representing? What small town? What do you call home? So at the end of the day, you've made it to a certain level already in life, per se, and you're looking to, again, nobody's arrived completely, but again, what city do you represent? And again, I can already, sit back and tell. I know a couple. We got Stacy Waller down there from New Jersey. Of course, I know we're gonna have Huntsville in the house, and again, I'm loving DC and Miami. Again, understand that you take whatever city you're from, you take it with you, by far. And so, with that in mind, Brother Hopefield, tell me a little bit more about the fact of when you said that people opened up the doors for you when you were first
Mm-hmm.
coming through, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that they saw something in you that was maybe like-minded to, or maybe they just admired what your tenacity and the energy that you brought. So you, in essence, had a mentor, and now
Mm-hmm.
you turn around and you become a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit more about the importance of finding mentors that are not just, again, minority mentors, again, a brother,
Mm-hmm.
a gentleman of color, a woman of color, but again,
Mm-hmm.
I know I learned so much from gentlemen, this Jewish gentleman. Again, he taught me so much in regards to business, and I love that, every bit of it. But tell us a little bit about who was your mentor and what do you do to mentor others
So
now?
yeah, so I've had a lot, and I'll say a few things around mentors, sponsors, and what I call angels in my throughout my career. People who've just been completely gratuitous in making sure because they wanted to see me succeed and giving me opportunities to show up. But one of the major things that in my career that it is the reason why I'm at Lockheed Martin now is my affiliation with an organization called Inroads. It is the purpose of Inroads is to develop talented minority youth and prepare them for corporate and community leadership. So the goal really of this 50-year-old organization is to take talented minority youth and help them to change the face of corporate America. So I am a proponent of the organization. And if you haven't heard about Inroads, please do look it up, inroads.org. I serve on the national board of directors now proudly as an alum and representing Lockheed Martin on the board. And so that was kind of my first foray into corporate America. And, one of the people that I credit with that relationship is my high school guidance counselor, Joan Ross, who came and, I had good grades. I was going to school. I was doing everything that I needed to do. But she said, come in here, boy, fill out this application. You're going to be in this program. Right. And that's the kind of instruction that I could get. She was also my father's teacher and my sister's guy. So it's kind of like she's very much tied to our family. Right. And so Mrs. Ross could tell me to do that. But she is the reason why I got into Inroads. I went to law school and everything and graduated, and I started working for the government and doing some good work. We were able to do at the Office of Human Rights, change some things around the world from that small, DC office. There's some laws and some things that you probably don't even know about what are happening because of the work we did at the DC Office of Human Rights. We changed some global policies. And as a result of that, I got an award from Inroads for the work that I was doing as an alumni. And it just so happened that the woman who hired me at Lockheed Martin, her name is Rainey Washington, who's currently the CHRO of FINRA, the financial institution, the regulatory agency. She was the keynote speaker. She is also an En-ROADS alum. And at that time, she was looking for somebody to come and lead her investigations, so completely in an opportunity that I wasn't planning and didn't expect, right? I wasn't really even looking for a job. I was happy in the government. I had, I was good at what I was doing. But that opportunity exposed itself just because of my affiliation with that. Another person I'll mention is Cherie Ashcroft. And, my internships and the work that I did was En-ROADS. I was in PNC. I was in banking before I went to Lockheed Martin. Before I went to law school. And Cherie was the first Black person that I knew who was an executive at a big company, right? And so she taught me a lot when I was just out of college, just around how to show up in meetings, how to engage with certain people, how to understand how you would be perceived, how to just kind of build my professional, day-to-day professional acumen and experience. And that was, a great help to me. So she's always been somebody who's just kind of given me guidance there. So I've always had those type of people. And then I've been intentional now that I've been in my executive role for a few years, is to have folks inside my company who give me guidance and mentorship and leadership, and to give me guidance and getting guidance and mentorship outside of Lockheed Martin, right? And so I've been intentional about trying to learn how to play the game at my company, and then learning and building my skill set for things that are, transferable and apply to me and how I want to live my life outside of it. So I have an executive coach who helps me with just kind of thinking about certain things that I'm doing and how to navigate my career, but not from a lens of only pursuing longevity at my current employer. And then on the flip side, I take pride in helping as many folks as I can. And because I was in that internship program in Lockheed, I created an internship in a law clerk program in the DC Office of Human Rights when I was there. When I got the opportunity, again, play the game till you make the rules. When I had the opportunity to build out the staff and organization to help other people, I made the opportunity, and we built a very robust law clerk program for the folks who wanted to do the kind of work that I do and build a pipeline of civil rights organizations. We were in DC. You have all these great colleges and universities and law schools, especially, and there wasn't kind of a pipeline being built of talent in the district to help the district with some of its diversity and inclusion, or just in anti-discrimination, civil rights issues. And so that has been one of the really just kind of the highlights of my career, to build that, because it helped people put in there. There's folks now at the EEOC, there's different law firms. One of my law clerks, I stay in very close touch with him. And so it's just, that's what you do, kind of going back to kind of the price you pay for getting to these positions, but also creating a federated network of folks who know what you're doing. And at some point, maybe I can call them and get some help the same way that I've been able to help them. Most people who can say that diversity and inclusion efforts have gone, and all that means, all that D&I may mean for anybody, most people who say that we've done enough are probably people who have not had a fundamental right or decision about how they can live their life decided by a legal opinion. And most people and my point is, the people who probably think that, we shouldn't have to do much more in schools are probably people who never had it be illegal for them to be educated, or illegal for them to read, or illegal for them to get married to the person that they love, right? So I think that with that kind of analysis comes a certain level of privilege of not knowing what it feels like to have been in a position where you didn't get to enjoy the rights you currently have. There are certain people who come into the world, and every right for generations that they have now, they have always had. And certain people who come into the world had to get it maybe 30 years ago. Right? Maybe 20, 30 years ago. Maybe, when DOMA passed, right? Could people only marry people that they, legally married people that they felt connected and loved and that they wanted to legally be married to. So I think, that's kind of my response to that. It goes far enough for people who don't realize how close we are to it not being in place. And what we are currently witnessing in the state of, the politics and the legislation in this country is that we are always one vote away from a complete destruction of all this infrastructure we have built, right? And so the John Lewis Voting Rights Act has still not been passed, right? Like there are certain things that are still just not formalized, and we're also seeing with the Dobbs v. Jackson case, like certain things we believed were fundamental rights have been pulled away by a court decision. And so, we are always at kind of the will of what's happening legislatively and what's happening judicially, what the political climate is. And I think that, we can't lose sight of that fight is always, kind of going to be happening.
You're blowing my mind. I really thought if somebody asked me, I would have said that the John Lewis Act had already been passed.
There's pieces of it that yeah. And if it's passed relatively recently. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to take your word for it that it has not passed, but that's on my mind as well, because ultimately, I think at least the last time when I read it back in the day, and again, it's been too long, everything in it talked really about the fact of equality. It talked about the fact of, again, just being fair. What in the world would make people sit back and say, no, it's not ready yet. We don't want to do it. This is too fair. I'm taking away that privilege per se. And an argument that not an argument, a discussion I would always have with my daughters as they were growing up. And I would sit back and say, never walk around like you hit a triple, knowing that you were born on third base. Right. Because again, that arrogance, that understanding of, okay, fine, I have arrived, I have done something, when all you did was be born. And now, you know what, you deserve this? No, be appreciative of what you have been given by those who came before you, but don't sit back and look down or look past others who are trying to fight and, get to where you just had the privilege of being born into per se. So you can take that in several different ways by far. I am going to open this up to, just if you don't mind, to a couple of questions. Again, guys, I would love to have it where if there's maybe 2 or 3 questions that we can ask, Brother Coefield, I'd greatly appreciate it. Just raise your hand.
All right. So my question is, what do you think the role of entrepreneurship is in equality in America?
One, I think that it's important for folks to know that the only way to kind of build wealth and to obtain some sort of quote unquote success in society is not to play the corporate game. That we need entrepreneurs, we need the creativity, we need different ways of folks being able to build careers that don't require folks to work for the large corporations and just build their career over decades and decades. I think that's a big thing. I don't know that. I guess you could say that the entrepreneurial route, it's important for people to know that there's people of color doing it, a variety of folks in that lane. Just being a little bit vocal about what your needs are. And, one of the things I'm thinking of is the Freedom Fund or Victory Fund. There's a case being litigated right now around grants going to women of color. And that's being taken up by one of the more conservative organizations, and some of the work being there to kind of create equality through the federal government grants and how they're rolling out money. So I think kind of applying pressure there around the representation and that you need to be a successful entrepreneur, giving some voice to that, because that may have been a population that has been particularly left out of those conversations of how to dole out that money. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah. You answered it.
And Brent, to that point again, I'm going to interject in goes having where a lot of the entrepreneurs really, really need to be more vocal and out there. I had a chance to go to New York probably a few weeks ago, and the mayor of New York City just had a chance to mention that they have a 38 billion, that's B with a B, billion with a B, in regards to budget that they actually had for education, and less than 1% of all of the contracts awarded to represent all of these students, the majority of them being students of color, about 70% of them, went to minority vendors. And I was just floored that you could have such an incredible large organization, a city, the largest city, pretty much maybe in the country, definitely the largest education environment and organization with such a huge budget, and less than 1% were represented by individuals of color, actually being able to assist individuals of color. So it just, again, there's opportunity, but having a voice, and I think we spend these times and these calls to make sure that we learn some of the tricks of the trade and what are some of the larger institutions doing that we can sit back and bring to ourselves to impact us as well.
So I hope you don't mind if I make a comment rather than
Mhm.
asking a question, but
Okay.
it bring in my mind, I feel like it brings together something that you said, and brings it together with the question that was asked about the role of entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And it's this, while I agree 100% that we need to understand that economic equity, we do need to understand that corporate wealth building is not the only way, and that entrepreneurship is one of those ways that we can achieve that equity. In addition to that, we also have to understand that entrepreneurship is hard, and not everybody is built for it. So the other side of that is what the comment that you made, which is, play the game until you make the rules. So some of us, our path to entrepreneurship might start with being in those corporate environments, and we need to be knowledgeable and educated about how to make the most of what we have wherever we are. Or maybe the saying that my parents said to me, which is, grow where you're planted. Be the best, learn the most, be number one at whatever you're doing, so that when that next opportunity comes, you're already got some skin in the game and some experience to help you be successful at that. So I just kind of wanted to acknowledge the coming together of the question that was raised and the comment that was made, because I think it's really, really important to understand who you are and what you're built for and what you want to do, and there's seasons to everything too. So
Yeah.
but
Thank
thank
you for
you.
that. Thank you.
Mhm.
That was a great response for Brent's question.
And so, with that in mind, again,
Mhm.
Brother Coefield, if you wanted to give us any closing points in regards to things that we could walk away with.
Yeah, I'll say a few things to do. Obligatory. One, make sure that regardless of the size of your company, that you have some rules in place that tell people that they're going to be treated fairly as you employ them, right? So I'm assuming that folks have smaller companies or engaging with smaller companies, that you set some standards for how folks are supposed to be treated, that should be treated fairly and without regard to their protected characteristics, their race, their gender, their religion, things like that. And make sure that if folks have a challenge or a problem, that there's a place to go at your company for them to report those concerns and have their grievances heard. I would also encourage everybody just to pay attention. I know that a lot of the fanfare around the last Supreme Court term and decisions were around the affirmative action being changed with respect to colleges and universities. It doesn't change as much for those companies like mine who are a federal contractor. We still maintain those affirmative action obligations regardless of the Supreme Court opinion there. But pay attention to those companies who are now using that decision to pull back on their efforts around D&I, and they're using that because they don't really have to, right? That impacts the schools. So schools, yes, do have to make some changes, but corporations are not really required to make any changes. So those who are using that as a kind of a guise to make those changes, be paying attention to that, but also know that that wasn't the most impactful kind of civil rights legislation or decision that came out of that Supreme Court term. There's also been some changes into what happens as far as religious accommodations in the workplace. So be mindful of that as small employers, because you may be just as responsible for your employees and making sure that you're providing them religious accommodations. And then just continue to apply pressure. I think that, we get into positions that we all have some sort of power in the organizations that we are in. Use the power that you have wherever you are responsibly. and be very responsible with the powers you have over people's careers or people's opportunities to build wealth or to pursue business, and just make sure that you are, you know, good stewards of the power that you all have.